Breast, also known as the mammary gland. The mammary gland is a modified sweat gland present in the superficial fascia of the pectoral region. The mammary gland is found in both sexes. However, it remains rudimentary in male but becomes well developed in female at puberty. On rare occasions, the breasts of male become enlarged. This condition is called gynecomastia. In female, it forms an accessory sex organ of female reproductive system and provides milk to the newborn baby. Location. The breast is located in the superficial fascia of the pectoral region. A small extension from its superolateral part, known as the axillary tail of Spence, however, pierces the deep fascia and extends into the axilla. The aperture in the deep fascia through which the axillary tail passes into the axilla is called the foramen of Langer. The axillary tail is the site of high percentage of breast tumor. Shape and extent. The shape, it is a hemispherical bulge. It extends vertically from the second rib to the sixth rib, and horizontally it extends from the lateral border of the sternum to the mid-axillary line. Relations. The deep aspect of breast is related to the following structures from superficial to deep. Pectoral fascia, 3 muscles, pectoralis major, serratus anterior, and external oblique. The breast is separated from the pectoral fascia by a space known as the retromammary space, which is filled with loose areolar tissue. Due to the presence of loose areolar tissue deep to the breast can be moved freely up and down and from side to side over the pectoral fascia. Structure. The breast consists of the following 3 structures: skin, stroma, parenchyma, also known as glandular tissue, mammary gland proper. Skin. It is the covering for the breast and presents the following features. Nipple. It is a conical projection below the center of the breast, usually at the level of the 4th intercostal space. It contains smooth muscle fibers which can make the nipple stiff and erect or flatten it. Being richly innervated by sensory nerve endings, the nipple is the most sensitive part of the breast to tactile stimulation and become erect during sexual arousal. Areola. It is a circular area of pigmented skin surrounding the base of the nipple. It contains a large number of modified sebaceous glands, particularly at its outer margin. They produce oily secretion which lubricates the nipple and areola and thus prevents them from drying and cracking. During pregnancy, the areola becomes darker and enlarged. The sebaceous glands in the areola are enlarged during pregnancy and appear as small nodular elevations called Montgomery's tubercles. Stroma. The stroma of the breast consists of connective tissue and fat. It forms the supporting framework of the breast. The connective tissue condenses to form fibrous strands or septa called the suspensory ligaments of Cooper. The suspensory ligaments of Cooper are arranged in a radial fashion. They connect the dermis of the overlying skin to the ducts of the breast and pectoral fascia. The ligaments of Cooper maintain the protuberance of the breast. The fat forms most of the bulk of the breast. It is distributed all over the breast except beneath the areola and the nipple. Parenchyma. The parenchyma, also known as the glandular tissue of the breast, secrete milk to feed the newborn baby. It consists of about 15 to 20 lobes arranged in a radial fashion like the spokes of a wheel and converge towards the nipple. Each lobe is divided into lobules, which consists of a cluster of acini. Each lobe is drained by a lactiferous duct. The ducts from different lobes converge towards the nipple and open at its summit. Near its termination, each duct expands into a lactiferous sinus, which serves as a reservoir of milk during lactation. Arterial supply. The breast is highly vascular and it is supplied by the following arteries. Internal thoracic artery, also known as the internal mammary artery, through its perforating branches which pierce the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th intercostal spaces. Axillary artery through its lateral thoracic, superior thoracic, and acromiothoracic branches. Posterior intercostal arteries through their lateral branches. Venous drainage. The venous drainage of breast takes place by the following veins: axillary vein, internal thoracic vein, and the posterior intercostal veins. Clinical correlation. Metastasis of the breast cancer to the brain. It occurs through the following venous route: cancer cells from the breast to the posterior intercostal veins, to the vertebral venous plexus, to the intracranial dural venous sinuses, to the brain. Nerve supply. The nerve supply of the breast is primarily somatosensory. It is derived from the 2nd to 6th intercostal nerves through their anterior and lateral cutaneous branches. These nerves provide sensory innervation to the skin and carry autonomic fibers to the smooth muscle and blood vessels of the breast. The sensory nerve ending in nipple and areola play an important role in stimulating the release of milk from mammary gland in response to suckling by the infant. The secretion of milk from breast is not under neural control but by prolactin hormone secreted by the pituitary gland. Lymphatic drainage. Lymph nodes draining the breast. The lymph from the breast is drained into the following group of lymph nodes. Axillary lymph nodes, lying in the axilla and divided into 4 groups: anterior or pectoral, posterior, central, and lateral. Internal mammary nodes lying along the internal thoracic vessels, supraclavicular nodes lying above the clavicle, posterior intercostal nodes lying in the posterior parts of the intercostal spaces in front of the head of the ribs, cephalic nodes, also known as the deltopectoral nodes, lying in the deltopectoral groove. In addition to the above-mentioned nodes, the lymph from the breast also drains into subdiaphragmatic and subperitoneal lymph plexuses. Lymphatics draining the breast. The lymphatics draining the breast are divided into 2 groups, superficial and deep. Superficial lymphatics drain the skin of the breast except that of the nipple and areola. Deep lymphatics drain the parenchyma of the breast and the skin of the nipple and areola. A plexus of lymph vessels deep to the areola is called subareolar plexus of Sappi. The subareolar plexus and most of the lymph from the breast drain into the anterior group of axillary lymph nodes. The lymphatic drainage from the breast occurs as follows. The lymph from the lateral quadrants of the breast is drained into the anterior, axillary, or pectoral group of lymph nodes. The lymph from the medial quadrants is drained into the internal mammary lymph nodes situated along the internal mammary artery. Some lymphatics may go to the internal mammary lymph nodes of the opposite side. A few lymph vessels from the lower lateral quadrant of the breast follow the posterior intercostal arteries and drain into the posterior intercostal nodes located along the course of these arteries. The few lymph vessels from the lower medial quadrant of the breast pierce the anterior abdominal wall and communicate with the subdiaphragmatic and subperitoneal lymph plexuses. The lymph vessels from the deep surface of the breast pierce pectoralis major and the clavipectoral fascia to drain into the apical group of the axillary lymph nodes. About 75% of the lymph from the breast is drained into the axillary nodes, 20% into the internal mammary lymph nodes, and 5% into the posterior intercostal lymph nodes. Among the axillary lymph nodes, most of the lymph drains into the anterior axillary nodes and the remaining into the posterior and apical groups. The lymph from the anterior and posterior groups first goes to the central and lateral groups and then through them into the supraclavicular lymph nodes. Development of the breast. The breast develops from an ectodermal thickening called a milk line or ridge of Schultz. This line appears in young embryo and extends from axilla to the groin. In lower animals, several mammary glands develop along this line, but in human beings this ridge disappears except for its small part in the pectoral region. Here it thickens and becomes depressed and gives off 15 to 20 solid cords, which grow in the underlying mesenchyme and proliferate from the lobes of the gland. At birth, the depressed ectodermal thickening is raised to form the nipple. The stroma of breast develops from the surrounding mesoderm. Clinical correlation. Developmental anomalies of the breast. The following developmental anomalies of the breast are encountered during clinical practice. Polythelia, also known as supernumerary nipples, which appear along the milk ridge and is often mistaken for moles. Retracted nipple, also known as inserted nipple, which occurs if the nipple fails to develop from the ectodermal pit. In this condition, suckling of infant cannot take place and nipple is prone to infection. Polymastia is the development of more than one breast along the milk line. Gynecomastia is the development of breast in male, mainly at puberty. Usually, it is bilateral and thought to occur due to hormonal imbalance.